Hey friend, quick question. What if the employee who frustrates you the most because they interrupt meetings, miss one deadline, and then deliver something absolutely brilliant the next week, who seems to either be completely zoned out or so locked in that they forget to eat? You know the one. What if that person is actually one of the most valuable humans on your entire team? And what if the only thing standing between you and getting the absolute best out of them is you not knowing how their brain works? Now, stay with me because I think this might change how you lead forever, because you'll see this person is actually your secret weapon in a small business. And if you're new here, I'm Jen. I help small business owners lead other humans like a human. And today we are going to be diving into one of the topics that is closest to my heart because I am neurospicy, which is how to be genuinely a great leader for someone who's neurospicy, meaning they have ADHD or autism or a mix of both. Now, before we go any further, I want to be really clear about something. Everything I'm about to share is about your growth as a leader, and that's it. The people on your team, neurospicy or not, are responsible for themselves, right? Their healing, their self-awareness, their own journey. That is not your job. Your job is to create the conditions where they can actually do their best work. There's a very big difference there, and keeping that boundary clear protects everybody. Okay, so first, let's talk about how information actually moves through a neurodivergent, neurospicy brain. Because once you start to understand this, so much of their behavior starts to make complete sense. Now, I want you to picture a faucet, kitchen, bathroom, laundry, doesn't matter, just a faucet. When a neurotypical brain receives information, it's like water flowing through at a steady, manageable pressure, right? It's consistent, it's filterable, it's workable. You can adjust the temperature, you can control the stream, all of it. It's very predictable. Now, imagine a neurospicy brain. The exact same faucet, except that nobody controls the pressure. Sometimes the water barely trickles and they can't get enough input, enough stimulation, enough something to just turn the flow up. That's the restlessness that you see, right? The boredom. I've read the same sentence in this book 11 times and nothing's going on. And then sometimes without warning, that faucet blasts on full force. Every sound, every notification, every thought, every feeling, every sensory input in the room comes flooding in at once, and there's no knob to turn any of it down. That is when you see overwhelm and shutdown. That's when your employee stares at their screen for 45 minutes and produces nothing because the water is everywhere and they can't get a grip on it. Don't mistake that for laziness. And then we have what is called hyperfocus, which is when the pressure finally finds the right thing, right? Suddenly the faucet is running perfectly, powerfully, with total precision. And in those moments, they will outwork, outthink, and outcreate almost anyone in the room. Now, I want you to picture Sheldon Cooper of The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon walks into his new neighbor Penny's apartment for the very first time. And in about 4 minutes, he's already assessed the structural integrity of her furniture, corrected her understanding of physics, categorized every object in her living space, and explained in precise detail why her apartment configuration is inferior to his. And Penny is friendly about it, right? She's warm, she's doing everything right socially. And Sheldon's being rude, but not on purpose, right? He doesn't know it. His faucet is just running at a pressure that she has never encountered before. But to Sheldon, every detail in that room is data. Every social cue she sends, he receives. But it comes in through the same pipe as the furniture assessment and the physics correction and the temperature of the room and the sound of the hallway. His brain is not filtering by social priority the way that hers is. It's filtering by interest and logic. And when you understand that, you stop being frustrated by Sheldon and you start being more curious about him. And that's the shift that I want you to make with your employee. Stop asking, why are they like this? And start asking, what is their faucet doing right now? And what do they actually need from me? Now let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough airtime in leadership conversations. There's something called Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, or RSD. And this is most commonly associated with ADHD, though it does sometimes show up across other Neurospicy profiles. A lot of people mistake this for having thin skin or for being sensitive, but what's actually happening is a very intense neurological response that's an overwhelming emotional reaction to the perception, whether real or imagined, of being rejected, criticized, or failing to meet someone's expectations. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but it's something like Neurospicy kids get 20,000 more negative or corrective comments said to them by the age of 10 to 12 than neurotypical kids. They're 10 times more likely to be rejected by peers their age and then also report having fewer friends. It causes a lot of damage. And so here's what it looks like at work, right? Maybe you give a piece of feedback, super casual, super gentle, and your employee just shuts down completely. Or they go home and spiral for 3 days. Or they come back swinging defensively because the emotional pain of feeling criticized is so intense that their nervous system just went straight to fight or flight. Maybe you didn't say anything at all, right? Maybe you just seemed distracted in a one-on-one, or you forgot to reply to their message. And they've already written the story in their mind that you hate their work, that they're about to be fired, that they've done something terribly wrong, whatever, right? RSD looks a lot like perfectionism, over-explaining, right? And then people-pleasing to an extreme. They avoid asking for help because asking might mean admitting that imperfection. Now, Hermione from Harry Potter, right? There's a scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban in the divination class where Professor Trelawney, I think it is, looks at Hermione's work, dismisses her completely, and tells her that she does not have the gift. This is a girl who has received top marks in every single class since she arrived at Hogwarts. She's objectively the most prepared, most studied, and most capable student in the room, right? But she hears one dismissive comment from one teacher in one subject, and she walks out of that class and never goes back. A lot of people watch that and think that she's being dramatic, but I think what's actually happening is that her nervous system is treating that criticism as like a full-scale threat, right? Her identity is built on being capable and excellent, and someone with authority just told her that she isn't, right? Her brain can't hold both truths at once. That's RSD. And it's probably sitting in your office right now inside someone who's probably also your hardest worker and your highest performer. Because the same intensity that drives them to over-prepare and over-deliver is the exact same intensity that makes criticism feel completely unsurvivable. Now, as a leader, the reality of that situation is that you can't manage around RSD by never giving feedback, right? That's avoidance, and it ultimately fails your people. But you can learn to give feedback in a way that their nervous system can actually receive. The framework that I use and teach is called SBI, Situation, Behavior, Impact. It works for positive and developmental feedback, and it's grounded in observable evidence, right? Which means that it feels fair rather than personal. And for someone who's navigating RSD, that distinction is everything. And for someone with autism who isn't able to pick up on social cues, it's also everything. So here's how it works. Situation, right? You have to anchor the conversation in one specific nameable moment, not you always do this, or, lately I've been noticing. You have to give a real specific moment. In Tuesday's meeting, or when I reviewed your deliverable on Friday. This matters because it removes the threat of like a sweeping judgment about who they are as a person, right? You're not indicting their character. You are describing one very specific moment in time. And then you got behavior, right? So here's the key question. What would a camera have recorded? Not what you think they meant, not what it says about them as a person. What actually happened, right? You interrupted the client 3 times before they finished speaking. It's objective, observable, and specific with no interpretation, just what the camera saw. And then the impact, right? Share the real world effect on you, the team, the business, the client, whatever. The impact was that the client looked frustrated and we lost momentum in the conversation. You're not punishing them, you're giving them information. And for a neurodivergent brain, that may not have registered how something landed because that faucet is running full blast, right? This information is a map and doesn't exactly come across as criticism. And then the step that most leaders skip, at the end, you have to ask what could be done differently. Don't make any suggestions yet. You have to ask them first. Let them work it out in their brain first. What do you think you could do differently in that moment? Doing that gives their brain agency, right? And for someone who already feels like the world is constantly correcting them, being asked instead of told is the difference between a conversation that lands and ones that sends them into a 3-day spiral. Most of the time they already know, right? They just needed a safe enough space to say it out loud. If they're stuck, then yeah, go ahead and offer a suggestion, but ask first. Always ask first. Situation, behavior, impact, different. SBID, I guess. Or keep calling it SBI and just make that the 4th step, a natural part of how you close every developmental conversation, right? The template is simple. In situation, I noticed behavior. The impact was impact. So next time, what could you do differently? And then you listen. That's psychological safety in action, right? When your employee knows that feedback is grounded in what actually happened and not how you felt about it or your interpretation of their character, they can hear it and then stay regulated, which allows them to grow. I've got a bunch of resources on this, reference cards, a workbook, a journal on hard conversations, including how you use the framework step by step with real scripts, templates, and the exact language to use for a bunch of different conversation types. Link is in the description. Grab them. They are going to change how you have every hard conversation from here forward with your team, your clients. You can even use it at home. It works for everybody, not just the Neurospicy. Now, here's something that many Neurospicy people have heard about themselves their whole lives. It's that they have an attention deficit because they're scattered, they can't focus on anything, when in reality, it's an attention surplus, right? There's just too much going on up there. And you've probably heard the phrase, a jack of all trades, master of none. But the full quote is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And this is why they are your secret weapon. Oftentimes better than a master of one. That's a competitive advantage. And neurodivergent people, particularly those with ADHD, embody this more naturally than almost anyone, right? Their brains are wired to explore and connect dots across completely unrelated fields. And they get excited about something new and then dive in with an intensity that would take most people months to build. They go from knowing absolutely nothing about a topic to completely competent, sometimes exceptional, in a fraction of the time, because their interest is their ignition. So give them all the jobs, right? Move them around. Now, I want you to think about Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. And we're going to talk about a couple episodes in season 4 specifically. In one episode, Barney creates a video resume to help Lily find a new job. And in the span of that video, you discover that Barney is a licensed pilot, a magician, a martial artist, a tailor, an architect of elaborate social schemes, and somehow also an expert in about 11 other things that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Nobody sat Barney down and enrolled him in a curriculum, right? He became all of those things because each one, at some point in time, was the most interesting thing in the world to him. And when something is the most interesting thing in the world to a brain like his, he goes all the way in, right? Full faucet, maximum pressure, total absorption. And yes, eventually the interest moved on. They always do. But the skill stayed. Now think about who on your team you might have written off as unfocused or scattered or whatever. Because there's a real chance that that person has maybe become competent in more areas of your business than almost anyone else, specifically because their brain wouldn't let them stay on the surface of anything. The problem is that most leaders try to put them in a box, right? Same task, same project, same process forever. And over time, the light just sort of goes out. So the big question now is, how do you keep the light on? And this is where leadership gets both harder and more rewarding. Because for neurodivergent employees, especially those with ADHD, boredom is a neurological event, not a preference. And so when the brain has mastered something and there's no more challenge, no more novelty, no more dopamine, the tank empties. And an empty tank looks like distraction, disengagement, errors on simple tasks, and eventually departure. So let's go back to Barney. We're going to stay in season 4, just a different episode. So Barney makes a bet. Someone tells him that there's something that can't be done, and he goes completely all in the most unhinged way because someone said it couldn't be done, and his brain lit up like a pinball machine. Now, imagine if his manager, instead of ignoring that energy or trying to contain it, had learned to direct it, right? Maybe you say, I don't think anyone can figure this out, but maybe you can, right? Game over. Barney's locked in for months. Some people might call that manipulation, but I would call that understanding your people deeply enough to know what turns their engine on and using that knowledge to serve both them and the business at the same time. And so here's what that looks like practically. You're going to rotate challenges, right? Give them different projects that stretch different muscles. Let them touch multiple parts of the business and ask, what's something here that you've been curious about? What would you want to dig into if you had the time, right? You're going to be amazed at what comes back. You're going to make the goal visible. Neurodivergent brains struggle to stay motivated when purpose isn't clear. So you can't just assign work. You have to give them the context, right? Let them see how their piece of the puzzle fits into the bigger picture. The why is the faucet handle. You have to use your urgency wisely. Deadlines aren't a threat, right? For many ADHD brains, it's what makes the work feel real. But there's a difference between healthy urgency and manufactured panic. So just keep that in mind. You have to be honest about the timelines. You have to set clear milestones and then check in before the deadline, not only at the deadline. But I think that's good advice and common sense for anyone. And then you have to protect the deep work time. Interruptions are not minor inconveniences to a neurodivergent brain. They can actually knock someone out of a flow state that took literally 40 minutes to reach. Even 90 minutes of truly uninterrupted work time per day can be transformational. You got to celebrate differently, right? Public recognition is great for some people, but for a lot of neurodivergent people, especially those on the spectrum, being spotlighted publicly can feel super uncomfortable. So just ask them, how do you like to be recognized when you do great work? It's going to take you 5 seconds and it's going to mean the world to them. And then you got to be explicit, not implicit. Don't hint. You can't expect them to read the room because we already saw what Sheldon did to Penny, right? If something needs to change, you have to say it directly. And with situation behavior impact, you already have the tool to do it with the care and the clarity. Indirect communication is a minefield, but clear communication is a gift. And check in as a human, not just a manager, right? Ask about how they're doing, not how the project is going. These are people who often spend their entire workday performing normalcy by masking who they are to survive in a world that wasn't built for their brain. When a leader creates safety where they don't have to perform, you're going to get a level of loyalty and output that money alone will never buy. Now, here's what I want you to walk away with today. Leading a neurodivergent employee well is about being the kind of leader who takes the time to understand that different brains are not broken brains, right? Sheldon's faucet running at full blast makes him extraordinary in the right environment. Hermione walking out of divination makes her someone who needed one person to give feedback with enough care that her nervous system could actually receive it. And Barney completing every item on an impossible list makes him someone whose leader never learned to aim that energy somewhere that actually mattered. The people on your team are humans to be led, not problems to be managed. And the gap between those two things is where great leadership lives. So, If you want to go deeper on the feedback piece and how to have the hard conversations that actually land, again, check my link in the description. You can also grab me a coffee at the same link down there if you found this helpful to you in any way. Keeps the channel going, keeps me going. The world is full of people who manage, and what we need more of are leaders who actually lead and who see people. So be that leader, and I will see you in the next one.